The day Aldous Mercer handed his wife divorce papers in the living room of their own home, he was smiling. Not the nervous kind of smile a man wears when he knows he's doing something wrong. The comfortable kind. The kind that comes from believing, truly believing, that he holds every card in the deck and the woman sitting across from him holds none. Felicity Mercer, 37 years old, did not cry. She looked at the papers for a long moment, then she set them on the coffee table between them, smoothed her slacks, and said, "I'll have my attorney review these." Aldous laughed. He actually laughed. His mother, Constance, not the Constance from the list, a different woman entirely, Aldous' mother, 71 years old, and dressed in the kind of black that says "I have already won," was standing near the fireplace with her arms crossed. She had been the one to suggest the living room, said it was more dignified than a courthouse. What she meant was that she wanted to watch. The woman sitting beside Aldous on the couch was named Petra, also not from the list. A coincidence of sound? No. The woman beside Aldous was named Vivette Dolan, 31 years old, a junior partner at a consulting firm downtown, and she had the good sense to keep her eyes on the floor during the whole exchange. At least that. Felicity did not look at Vivette. She had known about Vivette for 4 months. She had made certain decisions during those 4 months. She had not shared those decisions with anyone. She picked up her coat from the arm of the chair, nodded once at the room in general, and walked out. Aldous called after her. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" She paused at the door without turning around. "I said I'd have my attorney review them." Then she left. Felicity Hargrove, her name before she became Felicity Mercer, and the name she had been quietly, legally moving back toward for the past 3 months, had grown up in Callaway County, a stretch of Middle Tennessee that most people drove through rather than to. Her father, Roland Hargrove, had owned a hardware and building supply company called Hargrove & Sons, a name that had always privately amused Felicity since she was the only child and she was a daughter. Roland had thought about changing it. He never did. He said the name had weight to it by then, and weight was worth keeping. Roland died when Felicity was 29. He left her everything. Not in a dramatic way. Not in an unexpected way. He left her everything because she was his daughter, and it was hers, and that was the end of the discussion. What Roland left her was not simply the hardware store on Birchmont Road. It was the store, the warehouse behind it, the 3 acres of industrial lot adjacent to the warehouse, a commercial building on the east side of Callaway that had been leased to a regional insurance company for 11 years. And the part that Aldous had never fully understood and had never thought important enough to ask about, a 49% ownership stake in a regional development holding company called Linden Cross Properties. Felicity had not inherited the stake so much as she had grown it. She had been working with Linden Cross in quiet capacity since she was 24, first as a liaison for her father's land dealings, then as a silent partner in 2 commercial acquisitions, then as a board-appointed advisor after the original founder, a man named Godfrey Wayne, retired and recommended her by name in his exit letter. Aldous had known she had some business interests from her father. He had never asked for specifics. She had never hidden specifics. She had mentioned Linden Cross at least a dozen times over their 9-year marriage. He had listened the way people listen to something they've decided is unimportant, nodding, then forgetting, then moving on. This was not Felicity's fault. She had met Aldous Mercer at a fundraiser in Nashville. He was 42 at the time, recently divorced, the kind of handsome that photographs well but softens faster than it looks like it should. He ran a mid-size commercial real estate development company called Mercer & Brandt, named for himself and his original business partner, a man named Owen Brandt, who had been bought out years earlier and had nothing to do with the company by the time Felicity came into Aldous' life. Aldous liked deals. He liked the particular feeling of being in a room where he was the most informed person present. He liked his mother's approval in a way that a man in his 40s probably should have outgrown, but which Felicity had initially found endearing, and later found exhausting, and finally found clarifying. Constance Mercer had never approved of Felicity. This was not personal. Exactly. Constance had not approved of Aldous' first wife either. Constance's position was that no woman was quite right for her son unless Constance herself had selected her, and Constance had not selected Felicity. Constance had selected over the years a rotating shortlist of women she considered appropriate. The current frontrunner was Vivette Dolan, whom Constance had met at a charity gala 2 years ago and had been mentioning to Aldous ever since. Felicity knew about Constance's shortlist. She had known about it for years. She had chosen for reasons of her own not to fight it, not because she was passive, because she was patient. There is a difference, and it matters. The marriage had been good. In the beginning, the way things often are before you understand what they are. Aldous was attentive when he was present, and only sometimes absent in the ways that should have been warning signs earlier. He brought her coffee in the morning. He remembered her sister's birthday when Felicity forgot. He was, in the ways that could be counted and catalogued, a reasonable husband. The ways that couldn't be catalogued were harder to name. He had a habit of finishing her sentences at dinner parties in a way that sounded like closeness but functioned as erasure. He had an instinct for taking up space in a conversation that was not directed at him. When Felicity's business required her attention, a call that ran long, a quarterly meeting she needed to travel for, he did not complain so much as he produced a specific silence, the kind with weight in it, and waited for her to fill it with apology. She stopped apologizing around year 6. He noticed, but he named it something other than what it was. He called it distance. He called it her being difficult. He called his mother and said Felicity wasn't the same person he'd married, and Constance had said sympathetically that sometimes people grew apart, and wasn't that just the saddest thing? Vivette Dolan had come into the picture approximately 14 months ago, as best as Felicity could reconstruct it. She had not hired anyone to confirm this. She had simply paid attention, which she had always been good at, and which Aldous had always underestimated. 4 months before the living room scene, Felicity had been sitting in a conference room in downtown Nashville for a Linden Cross quarterly review when she heard something that changed the shape of the next year of her life. Linden Cross's development director, a sharp-eyed woman named Brindle Okafor, 45, had presented an acquisition opportunity, a portfolio of 3 commercial properties in the Callaway County corridor, owned by a company called Mercer & Brandt. Felicity had kept her face exactly where it was. The portfolio included 2 strip mall properties. Aldous had been trying to offload for 3 years, and a partially developed commercial site on the northern edge of the county that he had been attempting to convert into a mixed-use retail complex. The project had stalled. The permits had been complicated. The original financing had dried up when interest rates shifted. Aldous had taken on a secondary lender, and the terms on that loan, as Brindle laid them out from the acquisition summary, were not good. They were, in fact, quietly catastrophic. Felicity looked at the numbers. She knew those numbers. She had seen some version of them 2 years ago when Aldous, frustrated over dinner, had explained the Callaway project to her in the abstract, complaining about the permits and the lender and the city council's approval timeline. She had listened. She had asked a few questions that he had deflected. She had, at the time, had no particular reason to press. She had a reason now. After the meeting, she asked Brindle to send her the full acquisition summary. Brindle did. Felicity read it that night in her home office with the door closed, and when she was done, she sat for a while in the quiet and thought about what it meant that her husband's company was in serious financial trouble and he had not told her, and what it meant that the company Linden Cross was positioned to acquire it, and what it meant that she held 49% of Linden Cross. Then she called her personal attorney, not the shared one she and Aldous used for estate matters, her own, a woman named Georgette Rallins, who had handled Felicity's father's estate and had been her counsel on every Linden Cross matter since. "I need to understand exactly what my position is," Felicity said. Georgette understood what she was asking. "I'll have a full memo to you by Friday." The memo was thorough. Felicity's stake in Linden Cross was not marital property. It predated the marriage by 4 years and had been documented as separate property in the original prenuptial agreement, an agreement that Aldous had signed without significant negotiation because at the time he had considered Felicity's father's holdings to be modest and the prenup a formality. He had signed it. He had not read it carefully. This, again, was not Felicity's fault. Linden Cross's acquisition of the Mercer & Brandt portfolio would, pending board approval, proceed at fair market value. It was a clean transaction. There was no legal mechanism by which Aldous could object to it. Felicity's role at Linden Cross, as a board advisor and partner, was a matter of company record that had been disclosed in filings Aldous had never asked to see. Felicity read all of this twice. Then she set the memo down and thought about what she wanted to do. She was clear with herself. She had not engineered this. She had not arranged for Linden Cross to come looking at Mercer & Brandt. She had not steered the acquisition. She had simply been in a meeting where it was presented, and she had listened. And now she was making decisions about what to do with what she knew. There was nothing improper about any of it. She had checked. What she decided was this. She would not interfere with the acquisition in either direction. She would let Linden Cross proceed as business situation warranted. She would not tell Aldous. She would not tell Constance. She would not tell Vivette Dolan, who, as far as Felicity was concerned, had made her choices and was welcome to all the consequences that came with them. She would have her attorney prepare her own documents. She would wait. Aldous served her with divorce papers 6 weeks after the Linden Cross Board voted to approve the Mercer and Brandt acquisition. He did not know about the vote. The acquisition had not yet been announced. It was in the closing period, quiet, professional, moving along the way these things do when the financials are clear and both parties have counsel who communicate well. The living room scene happened on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday, Felicity had signed a retainer agreement with Georgette Rallins for the divorce proceedings, moved the items she needed from the house into the apartment she had quietly arranged in Nashville 3 weeks prior, and eaten lunch with her younger sister at a restaurant on 5th, where the soup was very good and they talked about everything except Aldous for almost an hour. Her sister, whose name was Jonalyn and who was 33 and had never trusted Aldous in the particular way that younger sisters often know things before they have language for them, said over coffee, "Are you okay?" Felicity thought about it. "Yes," she said. "I think I actually am." The Mercer and Brandt acquisition was announced publicly 5 weeks after the divorce filing. It ran in the Nashville Business Journal and in the Callaway County Register and in several commercial real estate newsletters that Aldous subscribed to and which he opened on a Thursday morning at his desk and read with, by all subsequent accounts, an expression that no one in his office had seen on his face before. He called his attorney. His attorney explained the transaction. He called Georgette Rallins' office and asked to speak with Felicity. Georgette's paralegal informed him pleasantly that all communication should go through counsel. He called his mother. Constance, who had been following the business news with her own morning coffee, had already seen it. She had called Vivette. Vivette, who had understood from the beginning that what she was walking into had dimensions she had not fully mapped, said something about needing to think. Constance, who did not have the self-awareness to understand that her own maneuvering had accelerated every disaster now unfolding, told Aldous that there must have been some mistake, that surely Felicity couldn't have known that this had to be looked into. There was no mistake. The closing meeting for the Linden Cross acquisition of the Mercer and Brandt Callaway portfolio took place on a Thursday afternoon in a glass-walled conference room in the Linden Cross offices on Commerce Street in Nashville. It was attended by Linden Cross's legal team, their CFO, a transaction coordinator, and Brindle Okafor, who ran the meeting with the efficiency of someone who had closed 43 transactions in 11 years and found this one unremarkable in every way except one. Aldous arrived with his attorney and a look on his face that was trying very hard to be composed. He had been told by his counsel that Felicity held an ownership position at Linden Cross. He had had 10 days to absorb this information. He had not absorbed it well. Felicity was already in the room when he arrived. She was sitting at the far end of the conference table with a legal pad in front of her and a glass of water she hadn't touched. She was wearing the dark blazer she wore when she wanted to feel like herself. She looked to everyone in the room who noticed these things, like a woman who had been in rooms like this many times before. Aldous stopped when he saw her. His attorney kept walking. Aldous stood there for a moment, and then he walked to the table, and he sat down, and he did not say anything for a long time. The meeting proceeded. Numbers were reviewed. Representations were confirmed. Signatures were collected in the order that had been arranged. Brindle moved through the agenda with her usual efficiency. At one point near the end of the documentation portion, Aldous looked up from across the table. "I didn't know you were involved in this," he said. His voice was controlled. It was the voice of a man working very hard on control. Felicity looked at him. "I mentioned Linden Cross to you many times. I didn't know you had an ownership stake. It was in our prenuptial agreement." She paused. "You signed it." He looked away. His attorney put a hand on his forearm briefly, the way attorneys do when they want their clients to stop talking. The rest of the meeting concluded without incident. There was a moment as the session was wrapping up and the transaction coordinator was collating the final copies, when Aldous stood and looked across the room at Felicity and said, with something in his voice that might have been intended as authority or indignation, or some combination of both, "By what arrangement do you even have a say here?" The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when someone says something that changes the temperature. Felicity finished writing the note she was finishing on her legal pad. Then she looked up. "Interest," she said. 49%. She set her pen down. "I've been a partner here for 13 years, Aldous." She closed the legal pad. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. The number 49%, 13 years, sat in the room and did what numbers do when they are precise and verifiable and not going anywhere. Aldous sat back down. His attorney said something quiet to him. Brindle moved to the next item on the agenda, and the meeting continued and finished, and everyone collected their copies and their things. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. The settlement was, in Georgette Rallins's professional assessment, appropriate. Aldertz's attorneys had attempted several angles that did not hold. The prenuptial agreement was clear. Felicity's Linden Cross interest was separately documented and untouchable. The marital assets were divided equitably. There was nothing dramatic about it, which was perhaps the most satisfying thing. Constance Mercer did not attend any of the proceedings. She had, in the months since the acquisition closed, become significantly quieter on the subject of her son's marriage. Vivette Dolan had, it emerged, concluded that the situation she had been invited into was more complicated than she had been led to believe, and had ended things with Aldous shortly before the divorce was finalized. These were facts Felicity learned secondhand, through her sister, who kept a closer eye on these things than Felicity did, and who reported them with a particular satisfaction she made no effort to hide. Felicity moved back to Callaway County that fall. She had grown up there, and it was hers, and she had missed it in the way you miss a place that has always known what you were, even when you were still figuring it out. She kept the apartment in Nashville for Linden Crossboard weeks, and the occasional overnight when the drive felt like too much. She walked the 3 acres behind the old Hargrove warehouse on Saturday mornings. She had coffee with Brindle Okafor every few weeks, and they talked about projects in the pipeline and what the regional market was doing, and sometimes about other things entirely. She did not think about Aldous very often. When she did, she thought about what she had noticed in those last months of the marriage, about the way he had always assumed he understood her situation completely without ever checking whether he actually did. She thought about the specific comfort of that assumption, how much he had relied on it, how thoroughly it had organized his understanding of her and their life together. She thought about the prenuptial agreement, the one he had signed in under 15 minutes at a conference table in Georgette's office because he had considered it a formality. She thought about Linden Cross, the name she had said at dinner tables and in passing conversation and in at least 3 arguments over the years, always a background detail to him, always something he filed under minor and irrelevant and not worth the attention. She thought about 13 years of quiet, considered work, of decisions made carefully, of a position built slowly, transaction by transaction, in rooms where she was taken seriously because she had earned the right to be there. She did not feel angry about any of it. She had moved through the anger a long time ago, back in those 4 months, when she was reading documents and making decisions and waiting. What she felt now was something closer to clarity. The particular clearness of understanding, finally and completely, that she had never needed anyone's permission to be exactly what she was. The old hardware store on Birchmont Road still had her father's name above the door, Hargrove and Sons. She had been asked a few years back whether she wanted to change it. She had said no. She said the name had weight to it by then. Weight was worth keeping.